Let's talk about one of the most mind-bending encounters in all of ancient history. What if I told you that the legions of Rome and the armies of Han China actually met in battle? We're talking about a lost army, a secret war, and a clash of empires that just should not have been possible.
I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, right? Roman legionaries, thousands of miles from home, squared up against the might of the Han Dynasty. But here's the thing, it really happened, and the story of how it went down is honestly more incredible than you can imagine.
So, let's set the scene. The year is 36 BC. We're at a remote fortress deep in the heart of the Central Asian steppe. And it's here that a Chinese army saw something so bizarre, so completely alien, that it would accidentally solve a mystery that had haunted Rome for 17 years.
Okay, so try to put yourself in their shoes. You're a Han commander, you've marched your massive army to this fortress, and you're expecting to see, a typical nomadic stronghold. But what you find instead, well, it's something else entirely. It's amazing how detailed the Han records are. They describe this weird double wall system with an outer barricade made of huge logs, something they've never seen in that part of the world. But then the gates swing open, and it's not cavalry that charges out. It's about 100 infantrymen moving like a machine in a perfect square, their shields interlocked. They were doing drills with a kind of precision that just wasn't how nomads fought.
The Han actually came up with a name for it. They called it the fish scale formation. And I mean, it's a perfect description, right? A moving wall of shields that looks just like the scales on a fish. And this is the absolute core of the mystery. Because that formation, it was the trademark of one army and one army only, the legions of Rome. So the big question is, what in the world were they doing here? To answer that, we've got to rewind the clock 17 years.
Yet the journey for these particular soldiers, it doesn't start with some glorious victory. Oh no. It kicks off with one of the most humiliating, soul-crushing defeats in all of Roman history.
So back in 53 BC, you've got this super rich Roman general, Marcus Crassus. He marches 40,000 of Rome's finest soldiers into the desert to fight the Parthians. He outnumbers them 4-1. On paper, this should have been an absolute walk in the park. But it wasn't.
The Parthians and their legendary horse archers just ran circles around the Roman legions. They perfected that famous Parthian shot, where they pretend to retreat and then twist around on their horses to fire arrows back at you. It was devastating. 20,000 Roman soldiers died in the sand, a total unmitigated disaster. But here's the key part of the story. 10,000 soldiers, an entire legion's worth, weren't killed. They were captured. And these men, the survivors of this catastrophe, they become our lost legion. Back in Rome, nobody knew what happened to them. They just vanished. Now, if you're the Parthians, you can't just keep 10,000 elite enemy soldiers near your border. So they did something really clever. They marched them thousands of miles east to the absolute edge of their empire and used them as border guards on the Silk Road. For 17 long years, these Romans were stuck there, their story fading into myth, until a local warlord hired them as mercenaries.
Okay, so let's jump back to the other side of this story. Because half a world away, a low-ranking but incredibly ambitious Han commander named Chen Tong is about to make a decision so bold it would either make him a national hero or get him executed for treason.
You see, Chen Tang was not your average Han general. He didn't come from some rich, noble family. He grew up poor, which made him sharp, ruthless, and street smart, or I guess frontier smart. He saw opportunities where all the comfortable guys back in the capital just saw risks.
So, when he gets word that this warlord, Ziji, has built this weird new fortress, he knows he has to act fast. But getting permission from the emperor would take months. So what does he do? The absolute madman forges an imperial order himself, raises an army of 40,000 men, and, this is the best part, when his boss hesitates,
Chen Tong literally pulls out his sword and forces him to go along with the plan. I mean, that's pure treason.
In this quote right here, it just sums him up perfectly. He's basically telling his superior, look, the train has already left the station. Are you really going to try and stand in front of it? It was the ultimate power move. He was all in. For him, it was glory or death, with no in-between.
So the stage is set. You have the last remnants of a lost Roman legion now working as mercenaries for a warlord, and you have a rogue Han general leading an illegal army marching right towards them. The two threads of our story are about to slam into each other at the Battle of Jiji. This is the moment history holds its breath.
Let's break down the matchup. In one corner, you've got the Roman vets, unbelievably disciplined and hardened by almost 2 decades of constant fighting. In the other corner, you've got the Han war machine. We're talking overwhelming numbers, incredible supply lines, and their ace in the hole, the devastating Chinese crossbow.
The battle itself, it was swift and it was brutal. Turns out, even Roman discipline can't stand up to that kind of firepower. Chen Tong unleashed a storm of crossbow bolts that literally darkened the sky, pinning the defenders down. While they were stuck, his troops filled the moat, set that weird wooden wall on fire, and just systematically took the fortress apart.
The warlord Ziji was hit by a bolt during the fighting and was eventually killed. Now, you have to understand, this was a massive deal. Ziji was the supreme leader of the Xiongnu, the Han's greatest rivals. For a Han army to kill their supreme leader in open battle, well, that had never, ever happened before.
Okay, so the warlord is dead, the fortress has fallen, but what about our lost Romans? And what happened to the general who committed treason to make it all happen? Believe me, the story doesn't end there. The Han army captured 145 of the fortress's defenders alive, and historians are almost certain that among this small group were the very last survivors of Crassus's lost legion. Just think about that for a second. Their 17-year odyssey began with a crushing defeat and capture, and it ended half a world away with another crushing defeat and capture by a totally different empire.
And what about Chen Tong? Did his huge gamble pay off? Well, kind of. He was made a noble, but his political rivals back home immediately attacked him for corruption. He was even stripped of his rank for a while. And the Romans, their incredible story just stops. They're taken prisoner by the Han, and then they completely disappear from history. So, what's the big military lesson here? It's pretty simple, really. The warlord Ziji and his Roman mercenaries bet everything on static defense. But a fortress, no matter how well designed, just becomes a tomb when you're up against an enemy who has you massively outgunned. Those Han crossbows made all the difference. And this line, this is what Chen Tang wrote in his official report to the emperor. It became one of the most famous and chilling declarations in Chinese history. It was basically a mission statement for the Han Empire, a promise to its enemies everywhere.
Which brings us to one last question for you. Put yourself in the sandals of that Roman commander inside the fortress. You see the sky turn black with crossbow bolts. You know you're outnumbered, outgunned, and thousands of miles from home. What's the call? Do you trust in your discipline, lock shields, and hold the line? Or do you say, to hell with it, and order one final, desperate charge out the gates? What would you do?